name is Amber, and I am Zuko's wife. I am a computer scientist, but I'm going to be speaking about ketogenic diets, which is something I've been studying as a hobby for about 15 years. And Zuko and I have been writing about it on our website. It's called the Ketogenic Diet for Health, and the URL is ketotic.org. And I think we have some cards, do we not?
Oh yeah.
If you want that written down. So we've been writing about this and I've been studying it, but I've never spoken to anyone, to an audience about it before, so this is new for me. I was reluctant to put ketogenic diet in the title. I didn't put ketogenic diet in the title, and that's because of the word diet, which I think has bad connotations, because for the most part, if you're talking about a diet, you're talking about something that has sort of weak medical effects. Now, certainly if you have an allergy or an intolerance, or there's something that you can't process because you have a genetic mutation, then a dietary therapy in which you avoid that food can have a very strong effect for you. But in general, diets, although they might improve your chances or make you feel a bit better, they're not medical grade therapies. If someone came up to you and said, I have this dietary therapy, and if you follow it, you're going to be able to stop taking your prescription drugs for some serious medical problem like bipolar disorder, or it's going to cure or prevent a major progressive terminal disease like Alzheimer's or cancer, you should probably be very skeptical and expect that you're being preyed on because you're vulnerable. But the ketogenic diet is a major exception to that. It's an outlier. And I wanted to explain why it's different and some great properties of it that I think make it very important. So one of the reasons that we know that a ketogenic diet is really powerful is because there is a major disease, epilepsy, for which it is standard clinical practice now to give people a ketogenic diet in order to treat it, at least in children. So Zuko knows a lot about epilepsy, and I'd like him to talk about that a little bit.
Okay, in brief, if you have 2 or more seizures for some unexplained reason, like it's not because you got hit on the head, then you'll be classified as having epilepsy. And a neurologist would want to start trying to treat you as soon as possible, because there's this thing called kindling, which is that if you have seizures, that seems to make you more vulnerable to having more seizures, and at least in some people. And so they try to control seizures as soon as they can to prevent them from getting worse. And so this usually starts in children rather than starting with adults. And so they start trying anti-epileptic drugs on such children right away. And about 2/3 of people who have this problem, the anti-epileptic drugs will be successful enough in controlling the seizures that it will be considered like a sustainable treatment. In some cases, it'll be completely cured by an anti-epileptic drug. And then the people will just be free of seizures for the rest of their lives. But in about 1/3 of people, which is a lot, there's like 1 million people in the United States who are in that unlucky third that the drugs don't help, or don't help enough, or the side effects of the drugs are too bad to tolerate. And so they're stuck with potentially crippling, life-threatening, potentially progressive disease called epilepsy, and no treatment. Except it turns out that this ketogenic diet is a great treatment. And this is a standard practice now that I think any neurologist would agree that you should try a ketogenic diet if you're one of those unlucky 1 million people who are not saved from epilepsy by the drugs. In many clinical trials and experiments, it's been shown that about Amber might know the numbers better than I do. In about half of the people who try it, who try the keto diet, it reduces the seizures well enough that this is considered a successful treatment and they keep doing it. And in something like 1/6 or 1/3 of the people who get put on this diet, it completely ends their seizures. So it does something profound to their brains which causes them to completely stop having epileptic seizures. Is that enough?
Yes, but I'm up here for one more thing. I would like you to explain what a ketogenic diet is.
Okay. So a ketogenic diet is just a very, very low carb diet. So the standard diet that most American adults eat is really high carb. Most people probably eat more than 300 grams per day of carbohydrate. And if you try a low carb diet like Atkins style to lose weight, people who do that typically pick some target number of grams per day, like 50 or 25 or something, and they try to eat only enough carbohydrate to stay below that limit. Now, if you put that limit down low enough, then your body switches from a glucose-burning metabolism to a fat-burning metabolism. And what that threshold is to make that metabolic switch differs from person to person. But if you hit that threshold and you stay in the fat-burning metabolism day after day, then that's called a ketogenic diet, and that's what they're using to treat those epileptic children. And by the way, in my experience, the most successful way to practice this, it's like a do-it-yourself thing. You can totally experiment on yourself. And in my experience, the most successful way to do it is to just aim for zero. Like, attempt to eat no carbohydrate at all day after day. And if you make an exception on occasion, or you accidentally eat a few grams of carbohydrate, you're still way lower than the threshold for you. That's what a ketogenic diet is.
Right, and it's not just low carbohydrate, it's high fat.
Oh yeah, right. Low carb, high fat. Okay, now are you
Yes.
done with me? Thank you.
So we know quite a lot about what ketogenic diets can do. We're learning more and more all the time. But we don't necessarily understand exactly how it works. There are different mechanisms we do know about, and there are different theories about how it's doing different things. And it's a big research area, but the things that, when I'm doing scientific research, what I really care about is the empirical results, because a plausible mechanism story can be turned around by one experiment, basically. So what never gets taken away is the results that happen when you do something. So that's what I care about the most. And there are a lot of really important results about ketogenic diets. The most profound things that we know are effects on the brain. So, for example, we know that a ketogenic diet is a powerful neuroprotective effect. So, for example, well, there aren't a lot of trials where scientists have taken a variety of humans and put them in under different conditions and then tried to damage their brains and then check to see which ones survived. But they have done that kind of thing with animals, a lot of rodent studies. And they've seen again and again that if you take a bunch of animals and put some of them on a ketogenic diet and then induce stroke or induce brain trauma or even nerve gas, the animals who are on the ketogenic diet are profoundly protected from that damage. It's a very significant effect. It's like a superpower. But because you've switched your metabolism to relying mainly on fat and fat derivatives instead of mainly on glucose, that means you've changed things at the very local cellular level of how the mitochondria work. And so it not only has these local effects, but it has these peripheral effects to your body. And another area that I think is really important is in heart disease and diabetes, which are two of the most important devastating diseases that we're facing. And symptoms of those diseases are reduced by a ketogenic diet. So for example, if you have high triglycerides, a ketogenic diet will drastically lower them. If you have low HDL, which is the so-called good cholesterol, then a ketogenic diet will raise that. if you have insulin resistance, it'll improve your insulin sensitivity. And if you have obesity, which is, in my opinion, a symptom of those diseases, it will drastically also improve that. So I think that's really important. Those are areas where we have a lot of evidence. There is also preliminary evidence that ketogenic diets are going to be therapeutically helpful in many other areas. For example, those ones that I mentioned at the beginning, bipolar disorder and other mental disorders, and Alzheimer's, and cancer. Most of the cancer evidence right now is brain cancer, which is not surprising, but it also, there's good reason to believe that it will attack other cancers by the way it affects your mitochondria. So it's very exciting. And just on a personal note, I want to tell you that a few years ago, I was struggling with bipolar disorder. It was extremely debilitating. And now it's been 4 years that I've been completely off drugs and very stable. And I'm on a very strict diet. I eat only meat. And it's not clear exactly how much of the treatment comes from the ketogenic aspect, but it definitely is a ketogenic diet, and there are other lines of evidence that show that that should be having an effect on bipolar disorder. For example, it has some commonalities with epilepsy, in fact. And many of the modern drugs that are used to treat bipolar disorder are actually originally anti-epileptic drugs. So obviously that's had a profound effect on me. The other really important thing about ketogenic diets is that they are something you can do yourself. They're safe. They don't require a prescription. You don't need medical supervision. I should say, if you have a disease and you're taking a drug for something that a ketogenic diet is likely to help, like you have diabetes or you have high blood pressure, it may be the case that your diet, your ketogenic diet, will affect that and help it so quickly that you will be soon taking an overdose of your drug. So in that case, you might like medical supervision. But for the most part, it's easy. There are certainly pitfalls that people encounter when they try a ketogenic diet. The main one being not counting properly and not realizing, oh, that food actually has a lot of carbohydrate in it. And I was eating a lot of it because I thought it was like a high protein food or something like that. But basically, with a few easy tools of measuring, it's not hard, it's safe, and it's rare to find something that's safe and easy, and that the benefits, the potential benefits are really high, and they're also very likely to turn out to be true benefits. So I think that makes it something important that is why I'm here talking about it. So, do you have any questions?
I do. First of all, thank you so much for having the courage to share that, because bipolar is like tons of stigma, and thank you so much, because it's really good information. So it doesn't sound like you can do this as a vegetarian?
You can do a ketogenic diet as a vegetarian, but I do think that there are some reasons for being a vegetarian that I empathize with, but there are also a lot of reasons for being a vegetarian that turn out to be myths. And so if you're being a vegetarian because you think that fat's bad for you, or you think that saturated fat is bad for you, or that animal protein is bad for you, I strongly encourage you to rethink that and let me guide you into some research that shows that that might not be the case. But if there are other reasons, or you're just simply not ready to not be a vegetarian, or you're not interested in not being a vegetarian, you can construct a diet that makes a lot of use of eggs, or if you're not a vegan, and milk products, or even soy or other protein, and fat especially is the most important part. Fat to get in your diet so that you could do that and get the clinical benefits without sacrificing something that is important to you for other reasons.
I may have missed you mention it, but what type of meats do you eat specifically? Is it
I
red meats,
personally?
white meats, any meat?
I prefer ruminants, like so beef and lamb, but I also eat fish, I eat pork, I eat chicken, turkey.
Okay, so any meat really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Charlie, did you say you only eat meat?
Yes. Yes.
No, nothing, no cheese, no vegetables, no.
She drinks coffee.
So coffee is my plant vice, it's true. And I maybe should revisit that one day. But I was going to say something else. Can you, what was the last part
Is that
of
all?
the question?
Is literally
That's-
all you eat is meat?
Yes, that's literally all I eat.
Do you
Oh,
consider
cheese. You asked me about cheese.
Do you
I
consider
sometimes
beans a
eat
meat?
cheese. Do I do what?
Beans a meat? Do you consider beans a meat?
No.
Okay.
No. Beans are actually high carb, so I definitely don't eat those.
When you go and get your physical every year, every 6 months, maybe the blood and urine, do you ever have a doctor freak out because of the ketones? He's like, oh, you've got a fatty liver, or you have a kidney problem, you're not processing protein properly.
Well, the only time that I've encountered that problem is when I was pregnant, because they use ketones as a sort of proxy for measuring dehydration. And so they routinely measure ketones, and if you have them, then they kind of freak out. But I'm very lucky in my life because of many things, but because of my doctor in particular, who approves of my diet, has seen the transformation, and he's not philosophically opposed to anything I'm doing. And my lipid profile is actually excellent.
Do you not to get too technical, but like, what's the salinity of your blood and what's your pH? Out of curiosity, is it acidic, or are you still at like
So
0?
blood pH is always very tightly regulated,
Yeah.
but my urine pH is probably more acidic than most people.
Okay, and your salinity is still like 2.4.
I have not measured it.
Just curious. Okay.
So I've seen some studies a while back that some higher brain function burns large amounts of glucose. Is there any suggestive study that say that those, or suggested evidence, I guess I would say, that would say that those functions are limited by burning fat versus glucose?
That's an excellent question.
Did you say higher brain function?
Yeah, some higher
Okay.
brain functions, I mean, you're not going to catch me doing like derivative calculus or anything like that, but, some,
Well,
I don't
I'm
know
a
if I call
computer
it
science
critical
grad student,
thinking,
and
but yeah. I don't know if I call it critical thinking, just higher brain function, whatever you want to quantify that as, is burns large amounts of glucose under certain circumstances, under stress, things like that. So, soldier making command decisions under fire, that kind of thing, will burn through 10 times the glucose in an hour that individual sitting in this room will.
Right.
Has there been any studies done on it or anything that suggests that it's acceptable under this diet, that you won't have any adverse effects from it, or is that something that's
Okay, so there's something that's brought up a lot, and that's that the brain does have a minimum amount of glucose that it needs all the time. When you're on a ketogenic diet, one of the things that happens is that much of your brain function, about 70%, I think, starts being operated by using ketones instead of glucose. So I'm not sure how much, if you were to do a measurement of like doing intense brain work, if that gets taken up by the ketones, or if the glucose flux also goes more quickly. Maybe it's a combination of both. But you don't need to eat the glucose to get the glucose, because all the time you're on a ketogenic diet, your liver is transforming glucose at a rate that matches your needs. So it's sort of matching your blood glucose level to keep it in that range that it needs to be in by converting protein in the liver into glucose. And it stores it in the form of glycogen and ekes it out just in the right amount that you need. A lot of people find that when they're on a ketogenic diet, their energy levels and their moods and their thinking become a lot more even flowed, because instead of having this typical thing where you eat some glucose, your blood sugar goes way up, and you deal with that by flooding it with insulin, and then it goes way down again, and then you feel tired and you can't think very well. You never get that anymore once you're on a ketogenic diet because your liver just takes over and says, okay, we'll just keep it steady. And so that's a really positive effect. I have one friend who has started a ketogenic diet without any kind of problem that he had that he wanted to solve. He was just really excited about what he was reading on her blog, and he decided to try it. And that's the thing that he has said. He said, my energy and my ability to have a sustained focus has just become really smooth. And so there are studies on cognitive decline showing that a ketogenic diet can improve cognitive decline, but that's more of a fixing a problem rather than taking someone normal and seeing what happens from there.
Thank you.
It's called ketotic.org.
KETOTIC.
We'd like to thank Risk.io for sponsoring B-Sides today and allowing these talks to happen.